Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into something completely fascinating. We're taking a look at a highly unique text that attempts to do something, honestly, quite extraordinary. It tries to bridge a legitimate, peer-reviewed breakthrough in quantum physics with some highly specific, borderline fringe theological theories. It's a really remarkable example of how hard scientific discoveries can be interpreted through a totally metaphysical lens. So we're going to neutrally unpack exactly how the author connects the rigid logic of the laboratory to the boundless concepts of the spiritual realm. Let's get into it.
To really grasp the weight of the scientific claim being made here, we've got to start with the number 80. Specifically, an 80-year-long agonizing pursuit in the field of physics. For 8 decades, literally the brightest minds in the world were hunting for a very specific theoretical particle that just seemed to defy the standard rules of nature. And according to our source text, that massive 80-year hunt finally came to an end in July of 2017.
Because we're taking a pretty huge conceptual leap today, here is our roadmap for the explainer. We'll start with the angel particle discovery, move right into the math of antimatter, explore celestial beings and self-harmony, check out the Elysium world, and finally wrap up with the kingdom of freedom.
Starting with Section 1, the angel particle discovery.
Okay, so before we get into the spiritual side of things, we have to look at the actual peer-reviewed science that sparked this whole thing. On July 20, 2017, a researcher named Shang Shou-Seng, who the text notes is a disciple of the renowned physicist Yang Zhenning, published a groundbreaking paper in Science magazine. His team confirmed the first-ever discovery of what physicists call chiral Majorana fermions. Now, because of their incredibly unique properties, which honestly seem almost miraculous in the realm of quantum mechanics, the team affectionately dubbed them angel particles.
Moving right along to Section 2, the math of antimatter.
So you might be wondering, how exactly does this particle bridge science and spirituality? Well, it all comes down to the math. The text highlights this fascinating quote from the lead researcher explaining what makes this particle so special. He says, a particle is equal to its own antiparticle, and translated into a mathematical formula, it is equivalent to 1 equals -1. We then move -1 to the left, which means that 2 equals 0. You see, in standard physics, particles and antiparticles completely obliterate each other. But here, the core scientific concept is a particle that is simultaneously its own exact opposite.
What's totally wild about this equation is how the author isolates it. They take this mind-bending quantum concept, where absolute opposites merge and cancel out into a unified zero, and they basically use it as the foundational blueprint for their theology. In the author's mind, this 2 equals 0 formula isn't just some quirky feature of quantum mechanics, it is a universal constant. They argue it proves that two opposing forces can exist perfectly within a single entity, resulting in a state of absolute zero.
Which brings us to Section 3, celestial beings and self-harmony.
All right, having set up the science of a particle being its own exact opposite, the author introduces a parallel concept, but this time in the spiritual realm. They call it self-harmony. The text defines this as a life state that seamlessly combines yin and yang. It's an entity possessing both male and female characteristics as a perfectly androgynous whole. The author points out that this is a whole lot like a Taiji diagram. Just as the angel particle is its own antiparticle, a self-harmonious being contains its own complete opposite within itself, completely and perfectly balanced.
So where do these perfectly balanced beings actually hang out? According to the text, these self-harmonious entities are known as celestial beings. And the author claims that during their own spiritual explorations of space, they discovered that these beings reside in a very specific metaphysical location called the Celestial Islands continent. Next up, Section 4, the Elysium world.
Now, the author takes this localized concept of the Celestial Islands and ties it directly to ancient religious ideas. They argue that this continent isn't just some isolated paradise. It's actually a foundational part of the Elysium world. Rooted deeply in Buddhist teachings, it's described as a realm originally designed by Buddha Shakyamuni, specifically so life can exist in an eternal state of absolute bliss. But how do you even begin to convey the magnitude of that ultimate joy? Well, to define this extreme happiness, this source uses a surprisingly visceral metaphor. It compares this eternal bliss to men and women remaining in a continuous state of sexual climax. Yeah, it's a bold and admittedly pretty unexpected comparison, but it's clearly intended to bypass intellectual logic and just convey a level of physical euphoria that simply does not exist in our standard day-to-day human experience.
And finally, Section 5, the kingdom of freedom.
So how does a life form actually reach this eternal euphoric state? The author sets up a pretty stark contrast here. On one side, we have celestial beings, Because they're self-harmonious and contain everything they need right within themselves, they are entirely free. They require exactly zero external factors. But on the flip side, you have us, humans. And according to the author, humans are fundamentally not free because our very survival dictates that we constantly have to exchange energy with the outside world. We have to eat, breathe, and consume.
To really hammer home our fragility and our total lack of freedom, the text throws out a highly specific number, 64. The author claims that human beings rely entirely on 64 external factors just to survive. Now, while the text doesn't explicitly list out what all 64 of those factors are, the claim they're making is absolute. Lacking even a single one of these 64 elements means a human being simply cannot continue to exist. Our whole existence is totally bound by these continuous external needs.
But celestial beings, they bring the author's entire argument full circle. They achieve self-harmony. Since they contain their own opposites, exactly like the quantum physics of the angel particle, they mathematically equal zero. They require absolutely no external factors, which makes them completely free from those 64 dependencies that we have. Basically, they are a self-contained loop of eternal bliss.
Which brings us to the author's final, fascinating leap of logic. For years, the author notes, people completely dismiss their ideas of self-harmonious, zero-dependency celestial beings as purely made up. But now, they argue the peer-reviewed math of the angel particle proves that a state of 2 equals 0 can actually exist in nature. So, I'll leave you with the author's deeply provocative conclusion. Did the discovery of the angel particle in quantum physics just serve as scientific proof for the impossible? Does the confirmation of a particle that is its own antiparticle actually prove the existence of self-harmonious celestial beings living in eternal bliss? It is a truly remarkable synthesis of two totally different worlds, and it really leaves us to deeply ponder how we interpret the world around us. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the universe.